Hello and welcome to this video tour of the beautiful orchid garden in Sarawak, Borneo. I'm an orchid grower and lover, but was completely blown away by the extent and beauty of this little known orchid garden. The park is 15.4 acres, that's over 62,000 square metres in size, and holds 75,000 orchid plants from 65 different genera. Expect to see towering Vandas, enormous bamboo orchids, Dendrobiums, Grammatophyllum and some other rare beauties. Today we're in the Bornean city of Kuching, by far my favourite city this whole trip, and we're crossing this wacky, futuristic pedestrian bridge to get to the KNCH Orchid Garden. I'm Rachel from Douentza Garden in Ireland, and today I'm behind the camera as we explore what is surely the most fabulous orchid garden I've ever visited. In 1994 this orchid garden first opened, but in another part of the city where it had just 6.8 acres. Eventually, in 2009, it was relocated to its current location, where it has more than doubled its original space, and it was officially opened on the 5th of March 2010. The first thing that strikes anyone entering this garden is the tall Vandas. They tower above everything. At home, Vandas are occasionally grown in the home environment with their roots dangling downwards, but you'll never see anything as enormous as the ones here. Terete Vandas are a group of orchids renowned for their ease of cultivation in tropical gardens. Rather than needing coddling indoors or in a protected greenhouse, these orchids thrive in full sun as long as they have good air circulation. They do particularly well in countries like Malaysia, where warm, wet, humid summers are the norm. Plants can flower all year round. The flowers are large and long-lasting and don't seem to get as readily spotted by rain as many other orchid flowers do. Inflorescences up to 30 centimetres long appear from the axils of the leaves, carrying 3 to 6 well-spaced, large, showy flowers. Each flower can measure up to 10 centimetres in diameter. The upper sepal and petals are white or pale pink, while the lip is distinctively yellow or orange at the throat. Side lobes of the lip are typically curved towards the centre. In this garden they're planted in the ground and supported by sturdy hardwood stakes because terete Vandas like to climb. I've read that plants flower best when the stems grow above the support and start to wave in the wind. At this point, the plant seems to stop focusing on climbing upwards and instead starts to produce racemes of flowers from each node. You'll notice that the leaves on these Vandas are much narrower than those on other Vandas. This gives rise to the name terete, which means cylindrical. Plants are a typical example of monopodial orchids, the new growth appearing from the central tip of a long, slender, scrambling rhizome. Correctly, these plants have now been reclassified and moved from the Vanda genus into their own genus. They are known as Papilionante teres, but many growers continue to call them Vandas. This orchid species is found in many parts of Southeast Asia. It's been hybridised extensively, and perhaps the best known hybrid is Papilionante Miss Joachim, the national flower of Singapore. Incidentally, Singapore is the only country to have a hybrid as its national flower. Another extensively hybridised group is the semi-terete Vandas. These are crosses between the standard strap-leaved Vandas and the terete Vandas. These plants seem to need a little more shade and protection, but also make great garden plants in warm climates. The orchid garden is composed of a network of paths. some of them covered with arches or shade cloth. There are numerous orchids in hanging pots and planted in the ground, where the tallest are supported by wooden stakes. There are areas covered by shade cloth, notably the large circular Cattleya area, and there's a cool house for more delicate specimens. The garden is peppered with exotic trees and other tropical plants, and has sweet scent in the air and a carpet of plumeria petals occasionally underfoot. The lower section of the space seems to favour bromeliads and has a more naturalistic feel. I sat here for a long time. The garden is maintained to a very high standard and wasn't crowded at all on the 2 occasions that I visited. It is free of charge to visit. My only minor gripe is that there weren't many labels on plants, and I know you, my viewers, always like to see plant labels on the screen. I think I found the Cattleya area. Wow! Those of you who follow my channel will know that Cattleya is my favourite genus of orchid, and I grow them on a windowsill on a south-facing window at home. Here, however, they grow these beautiful South American wonders in pots under shade cloth. I wonder, does the shade cloth also serve to block out some rain? This whole circular area of pots reminds me a bit of a fairground with a giant carousel, a giant Cattleya carousel. Unfortunately, there aren't many Cattleyas in bloom. There are plenty of Dendrobium bigibbum in evidence in this garden, but fewer than in evidence generally in Malaysia. Certainly in Thailand, that orchid seems to be very commonly grown. Many of these dendrobiums are grown undercover here or semi-undercover in pots. I also see antelope dendrobiums with their cool, mad petals. This area here has some of the terrestrial orchids commonly referred to as purple orchids. I've seen these spathoglottis in several locations in Malaysia, growing wild or semi-wild. But what's this over here? This is, of course, Grammatophyllum, a genus that includes the largest orchid in existence and one of the longest blooming species in existence. This enormous epiphyte produces several racemes arising from the base of the pseudobulb, with many yellow-green to olive-green waxy flowers with dark purplish red marks. It's a giant among plants, and recently when I was in Chatuchak plant market in Bangkok, I came across a variegated form of this monstrous plant for sale. This orchid is quite unusual in cultivation, as you can imagine, because of its enormous size. Few of us have space for the pot that would be necessary to hold such a specimen. In this area we come across the bamboo orchid. Arundina graminifolia, the sole species in the Arundina genus, is a terrestrial orchid with reedy stems, which make large clumps. And I'm glad that both short and tall specimens are present here. In Malaysia, this orchid is commonly called tapa and can be found in secondary forests or at forest fringes. It's very common along the roadsides in full sun in Sarawak, and I've seen it growing in abundance there, usually from the window of a bus. There are several non-orchids in this garden too, and my favourite has got to be the plumeria trees. They are largely leafless when I visit in February, but offer some blooms and scatterings of petals. There are red bananas too, looking very ornamental. And spider lilies, which I've seen planted in many places in Malaysia, although not native to this part of the world. Malaysia is full of gingers, but I believe this one is red ginger or Alpinia purpurata, so not native to Malaysia at all. And there are heliconia in evidence too, a regular sight in Malaysia. The lower section of the garden has many bromeliads and a more naturalistic feel. I spent a long time sitting here on my second visit. There is a little something to guard against though, as there are many biting flies in areas of dense growth, both here and in other sections of the garden. I became aware of these flies the first time around, and they seemed a bit annoying, so I gradually moved away from the area where they were. However, that night in bed I awoke in agony to find both legs covered in lumps up to my knees. It was quite unbearable until I remembered I'd packed some antihistamines and took one. The irritation subsided. So the moral of that story is to move away quickly when something starts biting you. And finally we come to what is termed as the cool house, and I believe this is the place where the collection of Bornean orchids reside. I hope we'll see the fragrant pink Phalaenopsis bellina in here, a Bornean native. The cool house is a greenhouse, but it's used for the very opposite of what greenhouses are used for at home. At home, an orchid greenhouse will be chiefly used to ensure that plants receive temperatures higher than those outside, whereas here the greenhouse is used to keep the temperature lower than outside. Good ventilation is key in both cases, and I hear a big fan running at the back of this greenhouse. There is also some shading from the sun. Many of the orchids here are in pots, although there are some planted in the borders. There are Calanthe in the ground, and there are Cattleya alliance plants in pots. I notice Trichotosia vestita, a plant I already spotted outside in the garden. This is a giant-sized, hot-growing epiphyte with very long pendulous stems. The brown, hairy stems are quite mesmerising and tactile. It has small flowers that don't open widely. There are a few slipper orchids or paphiopedilums in bloom in the cool house, but not the native stony eye or lowy eye that are supposed to be here somewhere. I really enjoy looking around this greenhouse, but the best thing for me is the hanging Phalaenopsis orchids. These ones are so elegant, the way they drape their leaves downwards. And just look at the length of those pendulous roots. They reach all the way down to the floor, not something you generally see on Phalaenopsis orchids at home. I note that some of the pots are suspended at a slight angle to provide excellent drainage. These phals are grown so differently from how we grow them at home, and it's just wonderful the way they're allowed to grow almost as nature intended. We are nearing the end of this video visit to the beautiful orchid garden of Sarawak. I hope you'll agree with me that it is a complete treat for the senses and not to be missed if you find yourself in Kuching. One of the big surprises for me was how unadvertised this amazing place is. The terete orchids were the most astonishing plant for me, so exotic and completely unlike anything I could dream of growing at home. But maybe lucky viewers in Queensland or Florida know them well. I would like to take the opportunity to thank you for joining me on this video visit to Sarawak. And if you're enjoying my videos, please do subscribe. Many viewers never subscribe, but if you do, it helps the channel to grow and allows me to keep bringing you videos like this. Thank you as always for watching, and I will see you on the next video. Bye!